أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلائق أجمعين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم الكتاب المبين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيتهم خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. We find ourselves in a day and age where our faith is questioned. We go to school, we're around people, our friends as well as our teachers, and we're looked at with a kind of a crooked eye because of what's going on in the news as well as what's going on around the world. And the thought of and the questions that arise lead us to question our own faith. And as a result, it's up to us as representatives of both Ahlul Bayt as well as the rightful religion of Islam to explain these to both the people around us that question us as well as people within our own faith that do not believe what we believe in. And as a result, we have to look to history as an example of what we should do and how we should approach this particular example. And the point in history that resembles this the most closest is after the shahadat of Imam Hussein and the freedom that was given to Imam Zain al-Abidin and the people of Karbala and the family of Imam Hussein, and how they went back to Medina to again live their lives. And obviously, after what happened in Karbala, their lives were definitely changed forever. Bibi Zainab, she went and became a representative of Imam Hussein, and as a result, her job was to give the message of what happened in Karbala, to explain in the form of a majlis, to explain in the form of masa'ib to the world what the atrocities that the family of the Prophet had faced, and to describe it to the world. And this particular situation went on for quite some time until voices started to speak to each other, and word got back to Yazid. Yazid obviously was still in power at this point in time, and as a result, he didn't obviously like this too much because of what the emotions and what the feelings that this was kind of creating within the people of Medina at this point in time. Obviously, Yazid, being a tyrant, wanted to suppress people and wanted to consolidate his power and make sure his power was kept over the Islamic Ummah. And as a result, he asked Bibi Zainab to migrate to Syria and to leave Medina so that to kind of be out of the picture. But the job was done, and people started to question what was going on within the Ummah. Why is a tyrant like Yazid the head of state at this point in history? And as a result, there were some that used this to their advantage, and one of these individuals was Abdullah bin Zubair. And that name might ring a bell. Zubair was the same Zubair that fought against Imam Ali in the Battle of Jamal. If you recall, in the Battle of Jamal, one of the wives of the prophets, as well as Talha and Zubair himself, approached Imam Ali and in terms of rebelling against him. And so now years have passed, and Zubair begins to approach the people of Medina. He uses the blood of Imam Hussein as an example and evokes the emotions that are within everybody to rise up against Yazid as a tyrant and to have power consolidated within himself. And as a result, word gets back to Yazid. Yazid decides to send an army of 10,000 soldiers under the leadership of Muslim bin Uqba. The army of Yazid then approaches Medina, and as a result, there's fighting. As Zubair brings the ashab of the Prophet, of the Imams, and uses them to fight the soldiers of Yazid. What happens is that the soldiers of Yazid end up massacring the people of Medina. The men that fought against Yazid here are massacred, they're tortured, they're killed, and their families are left alone. And the events are so horrific, and Muslim Uqba is given nicknames within history that defile him for doing this act. He brings his dogs. In fact, the masjid of the Prophet was where everyone, all the women, in fact, went to seek sanctuary. Obviously, when their men were dead, when their men were killed, sanctuary was sought by these women in the masjid of the Prophet, where the Prophet is buried. And the army of Yazid, the army of Muslim Uqba, had no sense of respect whatsoever for Prophet Muhammad, nor his family, nor anybody. To the extent where there's certain, in Tabari and other books of Hadith, there's written that the army of Muslim had their dogs urinate in the mosque of the Prophet. They committed atrocities. They murdered people within the mosque of the Prophet. In fact, not only was the mosque of the Prophet not left alone, Kaaba itself, again Tabari as well as Balauddin talk about how the Kaaba itself was attacked. Again, looking for Abdullah bin Zubair and to find him and to eventually execute him. The only reason why this fighting stopped was because word got back to Muslim that Yazid had died. So as a result, obviously their leader is gone, and the people, the soldiers, return back to Syria, and Abdullah is left alone until eventually later on he's executed as well. But what happens at this point in time in history is that the people, the Muslims of the time, are left questioning, why are we Muslim? What is this Islam where it tells you to fight each other, to kill the family of the Prophet, to go and desecrate the sacred mosques of Islam, as well as you have the leader Yazid drinking openly, committing acts and sins. You have people that lead namaz in the state of intoxication, being drunk. You have these individuals that are now the leaders of supposed Islam, and people begin to question what's going on. And as a result, they move further and further away from Islam. And their hadith, their writings in history which state that dancing and parties and depravity are kind of common within the people of Medina at this point in time. It's done openly. And as a result, Imam Zayn al-Abidin is still the Imam at this point in time. And the tact that he takes within his imamat is something that we as Muslims in this time in history need to take as well. Imam Zayn al-Abidin establishes the Masjid of the Prophet as a school of learning for everybody, for slaves, for people that are of wealth, people that are religious and non-religious, to come and learn, not only about Islam, but about science, philosophy, etc. And that is something that we, as Muslims, again, in this point in time, need to adhere to as well. We have to come together and refocus on knowledge, acquiring knowledge, establishing a school, not only so that we can learn for our own selves, but so that we can teach others around us, and show everyone what Islam truly is. In the time of the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad himself used to be persecuted, used to be ridiculed amongst the people of Makkah. There's one particular situation where he's called, crazy. He's referred to as someone that's mad, someone that's lost his mind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Qalam responds back to these individuals. He doesn't say that these people are cursed. They should, ignore them and beat them and destroy them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خَلُقٍ أَدِيمٍ. Surely I have created the Prophet with the best of akhlaq. It's the akhlaq of the Prophet that Allah is highlighting here. And it's the akhlaq that we show when we go out, when we are in our communities, when we are in our schools and places of work, that will change the perception of Islam, the perception of what our religion truly is. And as a result, faith, the word faith itself is something that we need to adhere to as well. And the time that I have, I want to go over, and there's certain questions that I want to answer. Hopefully we can accomplish that in the time that we have allotted here. But what is faith? What does Imam Ali have to say about faith? What are the pillars of faith that he describes? As well as reflecting on the Quran and the examples that we give in the Quran. The ayah that I started with is an ayah that hopefully everybody here knows. It's the ayah in Surah Hashr, verse 21, where Allah says that if you were to reveal the Quran on a mountain, the mountain itself would crumble, would be destroyed. And that's the part of the ayah that a lot of us know. That's the part of the ayah that we have heard. But the last part of the ayah is the most important part, I would say myself. It's not only the Quran itself as a book, and a lot of times we use the Quran as a book and put it on our shelves and we revere it, we behold it, kiss it, but that's not paying the respect to the Quran that it deserves. The last part of the ayah, it says that the Quran, there are examples within the Quran that we as Muslims need to reflect upon, and as a result, with regards to faith, I want to discuss Surah Kaf and discuss how faith is described within there, and relate it back to hadith of Imam Ali. And so before I begin, Salat, please.
Everyone loud and together.
So once Imam Ali alayhi salam was asked, what is faith? Can you describe faith for me? And Imam Ali responded by saying that faith is a structure upon which it rests upon which 4 pillars. And what are those 4 pillars? The first of those pillars are conviction. What's conviction? Conviction is believing in something with your whole heart. Believe in something and not wavering and believe it to its utmost. The second is endurance. What is endurance? Endurance is whether you're tired, whether you're sick, whether you're you don't feel like it, whether you have your mind is distracted, you endure all of that, you struggle past it, and you pay heed to that particular thing. Third is struggle. Fourth is justice. Struggle is also referred to as jihad. Jihad is jihad-e-akbar. What is jihad-e-akbar? The struggle that we have every day. Do I steal? Do I do my namaz at the time of namaz? Do I not do my namaz? It's the struggle that we have within ourselves, as well as the struggle of learning. And Imam Ali alayhi salam describes learning as the biggest part of struggle here. Justice as well. Justice is described it's synonymous with, again, knowledge. Seeking knowledge, acquiring it, and so that you can make the correct decisions within your life. So, relating that to Surah Kaf, Surah Kaf itself, and the reason why I chose Surah Kaf for discussion here is because the revelation of Surah Kaf itself is something that describes faith. So at the time of the Prophet, the people of Quraysh were very much fed up with the Prophet. He was converting people, he was taking them away from the values that the Quraysh had valued for quite some time. And as a result, they went to the Jews that lived in the neighboring towns. And they asked, these individuals, the rabbis there, to tell them certain questions that they can fool the Prophet with. Questions that would make the Prophet look like he didn't know what he was talking about. So the rabbis say, yeah, we agree with you. We'll tell you 3 questions. And the 3 questions they asked were to tell us, to ask the Prophet about the youth that slept in the cave. The second question was to ask about the individual that traveled east to west. And the third question was to ask him about the soul. And the Quraysh, getting these questions, and getting the advice from the rabbis that lived in the neighboring towns, decided to go to the Prophet and pose these questions. And when they posed these questions, the Prophet didn't answer, and he didn't answer for 14 days. And that began to establish doubt amongst people. And people began to question, hey, if this guy's the Prophet, then he should know the answers to these right away. He shouldn't be, it shouldn't take him some time. That alone was a test of faith. The faith of the Prophet, the faith of the individuals that the Prophet had converted at that point in time. How would the Prophet answer? And as a result, on the 14th day, this surah, Surah Kahf, was revealed to them. And Surah Kahf, if you read it, it's divided into 4 stories. The first of those stories are Ashabul Kahf. Second is the story of the gardener. Third is the story of Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Khidr. And the fourth is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. So let's start with the first story, Surah Kahf, Ashabul Kahf, which the story itself describes what conviction is. And the story starts with a group of youths, young people like you, a little bit older than you, in fact, who lived in a town that's of Ephesus. And this particular story is actually believed by Christians as well. These individuals are questioned by the king of the time to denounce their faith, denounce the belief in one God, and to believe in a pagan God. And as a result, these youth, they decide, we can't do that. We can't give up our faith. We can't give up our conviction. And so they decide, and they leave, and they seek refuge in a cave close by. And as a result, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses them in a way. He provides them with protection by making them sleep for, the Quran says, 309 years. So these individuals sleep, and as a result, a few years go by, they wake up, and to them it looks like they've only been sleeping for an hour or so, and they decide we're kind of hungry right now. Obviously, they've been sleeping for 309 years. They're going to be hungry. So they decide amongst themselves to send one of their people to the town to get food for themselves. So they go to this restaurant and they give them money, and the people at the store, the restaurant, are saying, what is this money? We don't know what this is. And they look at him kind of with a crooked eye and say, what kind of clothes are you wearing? We don't wear those clothes anymore. And these people go back, and they realize that they've been sleeping this whole time. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of their conviction, because of their faith, Allah blessed them and protected them. The second of these stories is the story of the gardener. And there are 2 gardeners, and the Quran describes these 2 gardeners. One of them is very much wealthy. He has, gardens that are flourishing, the gardens that are producing vegetation. And the second gardener that's kind of just getting by, the gardens aren't as robust, as full as the first gardener is. And the first gardener begins to get this sense of pride. This pride that starts to make him, think that he's better than everybody else. And as a result, he starts to look down on the other gardener, and begins to say that these gardens, they're flourishing because of me. It's not because of Allah. I don't need Allah. Is what he says. And so Allah gives retribution by destroying his garden. Everything is destroyed of his. His whole wealth is gone. And a similar story you can relate to Surah Al-Ghathar. Surah Al-Ghathar says, Al-Hakum al-Takathur hatta zurtum al-Makabir kalla sofa ta'lamun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and this surah is revealed because the 2 tribes that lived amongst the Ansar. At the time of the Prophet, the 2 tribes, the tribe Bani Haritha and Bani Harith, the 2 tribes that war with each other about everything, about how many, one tribe says to the other, look how many, young men that we have in our tribe, while the other tribe says, look how many we have. And their competition gets so intense that they start to dig up the dead amongst them and start to show them and count them as people that are amongst their tribe. And this competition, this pride that is generated is talked about in the Quran at various points. But the message there is simple. And Surah Takathur says, Al-Hakum al-Takathur, Hatta zurtum al-Maqabir, Kalla sawfa ta'lamun. Sure, until you come into the grave, you won't know the punishment that pride gives you. And as a result, we see this within the stories, these two stories, both in Surah Kaf and the two gardeners, and the story of Surah Takathur. That pride, this struggle that we have within us to make sure we don't get proud about anything. This jihad that we continually fight within ourselves, so that it doesn't get the better of us, is something that we all need to do in order to strengthen our faith. The third story is the story of Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Khidr. Hazrat Musa is told by Allah to go seek knowledge amongst an individual in another land. And Hazrat Musa begins to think that, I'm a prophet. Why am I going to seek knowledge among somebody else? I've been blessed with knowledge. So Allah says, go to him and he'll teach you something. Salawat. Allah says to go to Khidr and to learn from him. So Hazrat Musa goes to Khidr and he asks him, Allah told me to come to you to seek knowledge. So Khidr responds by saying, I can teach you, but you won't have the patience to learn the knowledge. So Hazrat Musa begins to kind of go back and forth with him until Hazrat Khidr agrees to teach him. And he says, follow me, but don't ask me any questions. So Hazrat Khidr says to go and follow me, but don't ask me any questions along our journey. So Hazrat Musa agrees, and they go and they both go into a boat. And within that boat, Hazrat Khidr makes a hole in it. And Hazrat Musa, gets startled by this. Why are you doing this? This isn't your boat. You're destroying property that belongs to somebody else. You shouldn't be doing this. So Hazrat Khidr warns him and says, this is the first time I told you not to interrupt me, and I told you that not to ask any questions. So this is basically your first warning. So Hazrat Musa says, oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's continue. Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Khidr go to the second part. They see a little boy that's running around, and Hazrat Khidr goes and executes the boy, kills the boy, a little boy. Hazrat Musa is totally startled by this, and he approaches Hazrat Khidr and says, "What are you doing? You just killed a little kid." Hazrat Khidr responds with this is your second chance. I told you not to interrupt me. Don't interrupt me, and again, if you do it again, then that's it. We part our ways. Hazrat Musa agrees, and then they go about their way again until they reach a town. And within that town, people aren't very hospitable. They don't offer them anything. And Hazrat Khidr goes to a wall that's broken down, and he decides to build that wall back up. So Hazrat Musa is a little bit confused. The first two, he made a hole in a boat, which was kind of an act that wasn't something that you should do, or on the surface you shouldn't do. Second was he killed a little boy. Again, something that's kind of you would think that's something normal to do. And the third was he built up a wall in a town where people are very hospitable to him. They're been kind of mean to him. And Hazrat Musa questions this, and Hazrat Khidr responds by saying, this is the third chance that I gave you, and now we part our ways. And he starts to explain why he did these things. The first, why he made a hole in the boat, because the boat itself belonged to good people, and the king of the town or king of the area was going to confiscate it from them. The second, why did he kill the boy? The reason for that was because the boy was someone that was the child of two very pious parents, and as a result, those pious parents, they were going to be very much bothered by this one boy, and as a result, by him killing him, they were going to have other children later on that will be more respectful to them. And the third, why he built that wall in a town where the wall had fallen and the people weren't hospitable to him. The reason for that was because there were orphans. There were an orphan family that lived there, and underneath that wall there was a treasure that was buried there. And by building that wall, he was protecting the treasure for them. And the message that we get from this story is that it's one that we should take to heart. So knowledge itself is something that comes from endurance. Endurance is what? Again, struggling through something and seeing it to the end. Just like Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Khidr, again, they were, the stories were needed to be seen till the end to understand the message of them. The same thing that we have to take to our heart as well. When we look to faith, we have to see it to the end. Sometimes things don't make sense to us. Why am I reading namaz 5 times a day? I'd rather be playing video games. Why am I fasting throughout the month of Ramadan when I'm hungry? Things need to be seen to the end so that you can understand the message of it. And that's the message that we get from Hazrat Khidr, one of endurance. Something that we have to struggle through until we see it till the end. All right. The fourth story is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. Dhul Qarnayn, historians argue who this is. Some say it's the son of Xerxes. Some say it's Alexander the Great. Some say he was a prophet. But consensus is that he was not a prophet, and he was most likely probably not any of these. Dhul Qarnayn, the name itself comes, it's again debated within historians as well. Some say it means 2 horns because of the helmet that he used to wear with 2 horns. But again, the story in the Quran starts, and the questions that were again asked by the rabbis that were asked to the Prophet about describe to us the person that went from east to west. And the Quran says in describing Dhul Qarnayn, it says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah has granted the means to Dhul Qarnayn so that he can reach an end. What does Allah mean by this? It's pretty much it's known within the story of Dhul Qarnayn. The Dhul Qarnayn was again not a prophet. He was a normal individual that was given a distinct ability to judge within people, and to judge fairly, or to forgive someone, or to punish them. And Allah gave him special powers, and the powers that He gave him was the power to travel, and he traveled within the clouds themselves, so he can go from one region to another in a matter of seconds. And his legend kind of goes as such that he traveled from far lands and brought justice amongst the earth. And as a result, he reached one particular land, and there was the land of 2 giants, Yajuj and Majuj. And the story of these 2 giants is actually again in the Bible as well, and they're referred to as Gog and Magog. But these 2 giants were reigning, were persecuting the people of that land, and the people of that land came to Dhul Qarnayn, and they told him to seek justice for them. So Dhul Qarnayn decides that he will do so. He gets the people of the town, and they build an iron gate so that these 2 giants can't get past them. And as a result, Allah had also given the ability to talk to angels. And there's one particular angel that used to visit him routinely. And this angel came to him, and Dhul Qarnayn was explaining to him how he wishes that he can live forever, so that he can continue to worship Allah forever. And that he loves Allah so much that again he wants to worship Allah throughout his life. And as a result, the angel tells him about a region within earth that's far away, that's consumed by darkness. And within that region, there's a spring of water. Within that, if you drink that spring of water, you can live forever. So Dhul Qarnayn decides that he's going to travel there. he travels to that region, and the whole story is about him traveling through this dark area where there's lots of fear within that area. And within that area there is a spring there, and he's in search of it. And going to that area, he takes one of the wise men amongst his soldiers decides to take sand from that area and rock from that area and put it on a scale. And what he finds is that the rocks weigh less than the sand. Does that make sense? The rocks themselves, you would think that the rocks would weigh more than sand would, right? But when he puts it on the scale, the sand ends up weighing more than the rocks. So Dhul-Qarnain is a little bit confused, and the wise man amongst them explains to him that the weight of the sand is more than rocks. The reason for that is the same that the question that Dhul-Qarnain was trying to have answered himself. He wants to live forever so that he can worship Allah. But the worship that he does, knowing that tomorrow could be his last day on earth, that tomorrow he can die, is worth more than if he were to be able to worship Allah for his whole life. So taking that into perspective, taking that into understanding from our own selves, what we put into our daily lives, how much struggle we go through, how much justice we try to approach, again from learning, how much learning we can do within our lives, how much worship we can do within our lives, is more than if we were to be able to live forever and worship Allah. Again, it's the whole concept of seeking knowledge so that we can make the correct decisions within our lives. All right, so now, and the concept of justice itself, justice was something that was absent when we talk about the history of Karbala. One of the events that brings the most sadness to the people of Ahlul Bayt was that of Kufa. And Imam was asked about Sham, about what caused him the greatest sadness. It was Sham, and he repeated that 3 times to emphasize it. But when you read the history of what happened in Kufa, it's something that strikes the heart as well. The heads of Imam Hussein and his family were brought to Kufa ahead of the people, or the women of his family. And as a result, obviously seeing the heads of the imams was something that brought great sadness to the family of the Prophet. Obviously, if you see your family's heads resting upon spears, their bodies trampled, and seeing what happened to them, this would create great sadness there as well. One of the points is when Bibi Zainab sees the head of Imam Hussein for the first time lying or resting upon a spear. She begins to cry, and the Maqatil says that she beats her head so hard that blood starts raining down her face. And what she says is something that strikes great grief in our hearts. She says, she compares Imam Hussein's face to that of a full moon. She says that this full moon, my brother's beautiful face, has been eclipsed by the sorrows, by the grief of this land, of what's happened to us and your family. She tells Imam Hussein's head to open its eyes and look at Bibi Sakina, who has been orphaned, who has been beaten by the army of Yazid, who has faced, who goes and cries for the chest of Imam Hussein. She says to look at Imam Zain al-Abidin as he's beaten as well, as he goes and tries to take care of the orphans of Imam Hussein, and look at the tortures that he's facing. And all along, the head of Imam Hussein is reading this very surah, the Surah Kahf, which we discussed. And the ayah that it repeats is Surah Kahf, verse 9. Am hasibta anna ashab al-kahfi wa raqimi kanu min ayatina ajaba. The ayah says, and the story of the cave and the inscription, have you seen a stranger sight? And reading this in the Maqatil again, you begin to question, why is it that he chose this ayah? Obviously he could have chosen any ayah. One is obviously because he wanted to distract the onlookers from looking at the heads or the unveiled heads of women of Imam Hussein's family. The other is because, again, a stranger sight. Look at the stranger sight. People are watching the heads of Imam Hussein. They're weeping, and the people of Kufa, it's ironic to see them weeping. The people that betrayed Imam Hussein weeping at this point in time and looking at the family of the Prophet here. And because of the grief that strikes them, they start to throw food at them so that the family of the Prophet, the orphans of the family, can eat. And it's the pride of Ahl Rasul that says that they can't take the sadaqah from people. This is not something that they can have. And again, the sadness of the grief that the people of Kufa are showing is not something that should be mistaken for something of sympathy. But there's one particular account of an individual that takes Imam Zain al-Abidin and brings him to his house and tries to set him free. And in the meantime, the governor and his troops, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he sends troops to look for Imam Zain al-Abidin, and he puts he gives them a reward if whoever finds Imam Zain al-Abidin. This individual that freed Imam Zain al-Abidin puts the rope back on the neck of Imam Zain al-Abidin and brings him back for that reward. Again, these are the people that called Imam Hussein to help, that they would help him. And these are the same people that have betrayed him. The family of the Prophet continues into the palace of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and the spears or the heads of Imam Hussein are brought before Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And seeing this, he begins to play with Imam Hussein's head. He takes a stick, starts to poke at his teeth. And what can we say about his teeth? When we read Ziyat Nahiya, we read that Salam on my Imam whose teeth were bashed in by rods. Salam on my Imam whose body was butchered and whose corpse was left for the wolves and the animals to chew upon. This is the head that Prophet Muhammad used to put his hand on. This is the head of Imam Hussein, whose forehead used to be kissed by Imam Ali and Prophet Muhammad. Now, today it rests in front of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and he's disrespecting it by poking sticks within his mouth and playing with his stick on and playing with the Imam's head. The people, there's one amongst them. We spoke about justice. There's one individual amongst them, Abdullah bin Afif, and he was a companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He was blinded in both eyes. One eye was cut in Safin and one was in Jamal. And this individual was blind, and he's an old man. And he gets up, seeing the atrocities that the family of the Prophet are facing. He gets up and he says, "Curse upon you, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, to have done this to the Imam and his family." And in a fit of anger, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad tells his army to go and grab Abdullah bin Afif. And a fight ensues. He's of the Azd tribe, and the people amongst his tribe get up and start to help him. They help him and they fight off the people of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad's army, and he escapes back to his house. In his house is his daughter, who's fully grown, and she's protecting or helping her father. In the meantime, the army reaches the house of Abdullah, and again a fight ensues. And the daughter of Abdullah bin Afif gives Abdullah swords to fight, and then she tells him the armies are approaching from the right, and he would fight the army to the right, and armies are approaching to the left, he would fight them to the left. And this battle goes on for quite some time until Abdullah is overtaken. And in a fit of grief, his daughter screams and she says, "Father, only if I was a man and if I was there to help you, would I be able to help you at this point in time when you're taken." Abdullah bin Afif is taken to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and is told to apologize for what he said. He refuses and he's murdered. his head is cut off and is thrown into the marshes, and his body is crucified. But I say to Abdullah bin Afif, and the sacrifice that he gave was great, but I look to Karbala, and I look to the body of Imam Hussein, and I see Imam Hussein, and I say to Abdullah bin Afif that you were blinded in both eyes in Safin and Jamal, but I look to Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein was blinded by taking the spear from Hazrat Ali Akbar's chest, by reaching the body of Abbas, by seeing his family massacred right in front of him. I look to Karbala, and I look to Bibi Sakina, who now at this point in time does not have a father to rest his hand upon. And Abdullah bin Afif, his daughter was fully grown, but the daughter of Hussein, she's not more than 4 years old, and she looks for the chest of Imam Hussein to sleep on at night. I look to Karbala, and I see Abdullah bin Afif. His sacrifice was great, but I look to Karbala and I see Imam Hussein, whose body his clothes were ripped off from him, and his body was trampled by horses. And the massacre, and the family of the Prophet was desecrated as a result, not the Hussein.